God loves you. I've certainly watched my fair amount of TV in the past, but whether I'm watching TV or at a live event, I would say very possibly my favorite thing to watch as a spectator is football. I love football, and I'd watch two middle school teams play. Have more than a couple of times, mostly because my wife is a teacher in the school system, but that's not a chore. I enjoy it. I love watching the strategy, the skill, the techniques, the outcome, and the expression from the practice or practices that the coaches have had. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I always loved playing football when I was a kid. Plenty of stories there, but I recall one time I was watching TV, and I don't remember that much from most interviews I've seen with football players. But this one particular one I really did. They were doing some kind of a feature on one of the most famous coaches in the history of the NFL. That coach being Bill Walsh. He was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers for a good chunk of time. He was the main coach there for when Joe Montana was quarterback. Won, I think, a couple of Super Bowls. I could be mistaken. May have just been one. I didn't really look into it. I should have. But they were interviewing this defensive back, and the defensive back was talking about how at practice one week before they were going to play a big game against a really capable competitor, a team they had had trouble with before, that the coach told him in practice, him specifically and in particular, Coach Walsh came to him and said, all right, now what I want you to do is when the offense gets in this particular setup, this particular formation, before a play starts, I want you to stand in this spot, and when they hike the ball, I want you to run over to this spot. And the defensive back looked at him and thought to himself, Coach, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because based on what I know about football, when they line up in that formation, there's one of a few things that they're doing, but that particular spot in the field is not where any action is going to take place. But he said, well, even though I don't understand, I don't get it. I'm not the head coach, and it's probably only one or two plays, and if he calls me on it at practice, if we lose the game or whatever, I'll let him know, well, Coach, that's what you told me to do. So sure enough, game time comes up, and he's on the field, and the offense lines up in that formation. He goes and stands where he's supposed to. They hike the ball. He runs to the spot that he's supposed to run and stops. And the quarterback throws the ball to him. Right to him for an interception. I don't recall if the player ended up getting a pick six on it or not, but the player was amazed that the coach not only knew so much about football, but had studied the opponent so well that he knew to tell that defensive back to do something that was against his training, against what was natural for him, against what he had learned was the way to respond and the way to react in this given situation. And that it was exactly the right thing to do, the best thing to do. I got to tell you, there are times when God says to me, Steve, I want you to do this, and in this way, and it doesn't make sense to me. I don't get how that would be the appropriate thing to do, or the right way to act, or the right words to say. And maybe even it seems like it's not working out the way I would have expected it to at the moment. But in the end, it turns out to have been exactly the right thing to do. So, point being, in your relationship with God, He's likely going to ask you to do some things that don't make sense, that seem contrary to how you've learned to behave, or to the actions you know and understand based on our world, our society, our culture, the thing to do. That's one of the reasons He's telling you, is because you wouldn't have thought to do that in the first place. But He needs it done. So when God doesn't make sense, and you can, go through the Bible, it's replete with stories of God telling someone to do something that to them makes no sense. But they do it anyway, and completely change the trajectory of whatever was happening, whatever was going on, whatever results needed to be changed. Well, there it is. Sometimes God doesn't make sense. He knows more than you. He knows more than me. He knows better than any of us. I'll see you next time.